We're now live. All right. Welcome to the program. Thanks for joining me, everyone. Charles Moscowitz. I am joined by Michael D. Shaw, who joins me every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Mike, how are you?
Hey, just fine. We're into what now?
Let me just get a little volume thing going here. Hold on. The technology is so wonderful that sometimes it goes beyond my functioning here. That's much better. All right, there we go. Sorry about that, Mike.
Okay, so we're into what now? Day 7
Day 7 of what?
of the glorious Biden administration.
You know, I'll tell you, I see some positive signs, and I know that, you know, maybe I'm trying to engage in happy talk here, and I'm being,
no.
I don't want to be, you know, but I'm not going to be all doom and gloom as we've talked about.
Of course not.
In that I do see that there is some slight evidence that the system of checks and balances is starting to kick in, that there is some restraint being put on to this headlong push, I would argue, toward a soft form of Nazism. Let's put that aside. Either way, I see 3 events occurring just this past day or two that I think are good signs. The first one is a Texas judge, that being Drew Tipton from the Southern District of Texas,
Right.
just blocked Biden's executive order suspending deportations. And whether or not we agree with that decision, it shows that, in a sense, Biden is going to have to confront the same situation that President Trump confronted, with judges getting involved in politics. Now, I'm not going to say whether or not this is political or constitutional. That can be argued, but at least we have. Well, no, there is a difference, and you don't want to have judges like they were during Trump suddenly coming in and deciding what the Constitution said and saying things that were constitutional. But the point is that now that one of the things President Trump did very well was he left in place, I think it's at least 200 federal judges, not to mention 3 Supreme Court judges, and that they're going to begin to stand up and block some of these overreaches on the part of the administration, which means that there's going to be some constraint. The second thing is that Mitch McConnell, who of course has been dreadful with regard to the election, we don't want to say the word.
Oh no.
But because YouTube's watching, he's now back down on getting rid of the filibuster. And that means that the Democratic Senate can't just simply ram through every left-wing piece of legislation on their docket. They're going to have to get a 2/3 majority. And the third thing is that the phony impeachment, the conviction, is, I think, dead in the water now. You've got Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts, whom we can talk about separately, and that's a whole different subject. But nevertheless, he seems to maybe he's trying to perhaps create a little bit more of an equilibrium on his name in history, which he's so concerned about, by saying that he is not going to preside over this phony trial.
Well, okay, let me stop you right there. How does he have the right to do that?
Because
the Constitution states that the Chief Justice is supposed to be the guy, right?
Yeah, but the Constitution says that the Chief Justice shall preside over the conviction trial of a president, not a private citizen who is a former president. That's why he's saying this. So he's not recognizing the legitimacy of this whole thing, and I think quite rightfully. And so this whole monkey scam, this whole kangaroo court, is going to look more ridiculous than ever. And
let's go down that road for a second, if you don't mind. Okay, so he says, wait a minute, this is ridiculous. I'm bowing out. All right. So then let's put this into a civil case in a normal trial or a criminal. It doesn't matter. The judge says, you know, this is a crock. See ya. Okay, so the judge walks out of the courtroom, and now what it looks like is the prosecutor says, well, no problem. I'll get my brother-in-law to preside over this. I mean, how can you do that?
Well, no, there is a system in place. I mean, with him stepping out, I think that it then goes to another official. Either my understanding, actually,
Pat Leahy.
No. Pat Leahy is going to be the chief prosecutor for the Senate. My understanding is that if and when Roberts bows out, and he has, it's going to go to Vice President Kamala Harris, who will sit in trial. And apparently, and I can't confirm this, I just heard this like a minute ago, apparently she's let it be known that she's not interested.
Oh, wow.
So, it's going to be like, it's looking more and more ridiculous every minute.
What if they had impeachment and no one showed up?
It kind of reminds me in a way of Nixon's, night. What do they call that? When he fired
Saturday Night Massacre.
Yeah, that's right. He fired Archibald Cox, and then he fired, Attorney General Elliot Richardson, and William Ruckelshaus resigned, and it ended up going to the Solicitor General, who happened to be Robert Bork.
And the only reason he didn't resign was that they would just kept going down the daisy chain.
They would have eventually got to a local dog catcher. But, but the thing is, it didn't look right. So I think that there's this same dynamic now, and it's now also clear that enough Republicans are finally getting a little backbone, and they're saying we're not going to go along with it. So obviously it ain't going to happen. I mean, we've got Mittens Romney and them. I mean, they're going to he's bitter about Trump. He'll do anything. But beyond that small group, it just ain't happening. And it's going to look ridiculous. The whole thing is obviously a fraud. I mean, what do they think?
Why doesn't Biden just come out and say, let's not do this? I'm the president.
He has to genuflect to these radicals in his government who really are controlling the show. And yet even Biden has said, even though I support it, it's not going to happen. I mean, he's acknowledged it. So, I mean, it's, but he has to play ball with these people because they're the ones who are in charge of his administration, unfortunately.
So they're not going to back down at all.
They're going to go through. They're going to, I mean, so far, I mean, they might, because it's starting to look worse every day.
Yeah.
I mean, this is obviously a massive overreach for the left, which is what they do. And it's going to backfire. It's going to boomerang on them. It just looks, and it is so vindictive. I mean, the fact that they would, first of all, the idiocy of their claim. What do they think? Donald Trump sat around some smoke-filled room and said, oh, I know what we'll do to keep me in office. We're going to overthrow the government by sending some guy going down there with buffalo horns and a fuzzy hat, and he's going to march in, right, and take over the country. I mean, it's idiotic. What do they think? I mean, and also, the trial, in a way, it might be a good thing if it happens, because then we might get to the bottom of this. I mean, why is it that the Capitol Police and the security let people in? I mean, it's on video. They were actually taking selfies with them. I mean, you can see them walking through the hallways.
Oh, that's a good point. So you're saying that the last thing they really want is for the trial, because
I think that they're just so blinded by hatred for this irrational hatred for Trump and this wanting desire to have his head on a platter, even though they've already est the election. We're not going to say the word. Now they want to go for the full kill. I mean, they want to make sure that he's open. I mean, Schumer is open about this. He actually says we have to do this to make sure that Trump never holds public office again. Can you imagine that in this country? I mean, that's why they're doing it, and so that's what it's about. And I think that they've stepped in it and they're going forward. They can't get out, and it's going to look terrible for them. The whole thing is obviously a sham.
Well, even Harris, which I didn't know this until you told me, if even she said no,
then that looks pretty bad. I mean, again, I can't confirm that. I just heard that, so we'll see. but no matter what she does, the thing looks rotten because it is rotten.
Yeah.
And so these three things: the dead in the water impeachment, the ruling by a federal judge in Texas, and McConnell backing down. And by the way, McConnell says he's not going to vote for conviction. He's backing down. I think it's showing that the muscles of our two-party system and our system of checks and balances are starting to be flexed, and that you have the 10 U.S. House members headed up by Lynn Cheney, who voted for impeachment. They're being primaried. They're getting terrible response. I mean, she's never in the history of Wyoming has people been so upset that, and already there's a challenger. And
they say she's gone into virtual hiding because she's gone into hiding.
Yeah, she won't answer any calls. That's right.
That she, I think, stupidly didn't anticipate this. But what is she thinking? I mean, here's a guy that took, what was it, 70 or 80% of that state Trump took from
exactly.
Her. So what is she thinking, that she's bigger than Trump? That and I'll tell you what.
They think that apparently they never left the government when Trump won in the first place, and they're just coming out of the woodwork as this never Trumper, radical. I mean, they're worse than the Democrats. I mean, at least the Democrats are the party of opposition,
right?
But this is like, I mean, it's so loathsome. And this Lincoln group, oh my God, they're so out to lunch. I mean, now it turns out that the head of that group,
I was going to say that,
had some sex scandals and with underage, and their ads. I mean, there was something really wrong with them. I mean, the whole premise of their existence was, we don't like Trump because he's mean, because he's nasty. I mean, it's like, it didn't make any sense. They had no policy issues. They just didn't, they would go, and then they would start in with some real, it's almost like Antifa sent out a press release, bringing back, racist, Nazi, white supremacists, all that kind of garbage. And, I mean, so that's what this, they think that now that President Trump has retired, has left office, that they're going to regain some kind of footing, and they're way wrong. They're dead wrong. They're gone. I mean, they're going to be, meanwhile, President Trump himself is setting up an office of the former president.
Yeah, I think that was great. That was hilarious. A great name.
Oh yeah, that's hilarious. And he's going to be involved, and he's going to have them handle his press releases and his activism. And I think that the bottom line is that he's going to use his influence with the 75 million people who voted for him to make sure that these people are primaried out of office.
And I think in all likelihood that's going to happen. But this is one of the funny things to me about ego. All right. In the case of Lynn Cheney, she thought she was so great she could get away with this. And in the case of the Lincoln group, even after this pedophile scandal that comes out, which they had to admit to because the evidence was overwhelming, you think, gee, maybe we'll take a low profile now for a little while. But no, they came back swinging. What did they think was going to happen?
Well, for one thing, I mean, they still believe, and they do, and I feel a little queasy getting into this subject, but they still have big tech backing them, because Twitter apparently has suppressed this information about the Lincoln Project. They've been removing tweets about it.
It was in mainstream media. I mean, it's
yeah, but the big tech, maybe they think that big tech is still going to do this. Look, I mean, I'm having issues with that right now. I mean, who knows how long, I'm going to be here, to be honest with you. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing about a dozen streams and downloads, so that if I get pulled on one, I'll have hopefully the other ones.
Yeah.
Although, they could pull the plug on the whole thing. I mean, that's,
My take is that they're going to stop this because it's starting to be a real bad look for them.
I don't know if they care. I mean, it's sort of like, we've talked about this, Mike, in the past. Did the NFL care about the kneeling? I mean, and the loss of revenue and the loss of followers?
Not right away. not right away, but the key thing they did was, and this used to be in every sporting event, they would show the national anthem. And then they said, well, we're just not going to show it. So obviously it was embarrassing them that this had become such an issue. And the ratings on NFL football are down. So I think what's going to happen with big tech too is that you just can't keep ticking off so many people. And they're going to reach a point where this really isn't a good business model, because where does it end? Okay, who decides what the diktat of the moment is?
Mm-hmm.
And even old-time liberals like Bill Maher are starting to push back. He made the comment the other day that he always thought, as a liberal, you're supposed to be blind to race. But now that's the number one thing. It's race, 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 race. So I think when they keep dividing the left, they may realize that it's been an overreach. We'll see.
Well, there's been a good deal of overreach in that area. I mean, on the first day in office, Biden basically expunged the 1776 project.
Yeah.
From the lexicon. That was supposed to be, it was written by a commission of scholars to kind of set the stage for public education and going forward, and it was a cultural document. That's been taken down. There've been nasty false accusations made against it, and now we have returning the critical race theory education, which we've talked about. Very, very damaging, very dangerous.
Well, you're exactly right that people would ask, well, what are his policies going to be? He doesn't have any policies. He's be a puppet for the far left, and they're just having their way with it right now. I think the most astonishing thing that happened, though, beyond all the usual politics, was 1 hour. It was 1 hour after he took office, WHO came out with a radical new definition of what constitutes a case of COVID-19, which I estimate will lower the number of, quote, cases by maybe 75%. So what a miracle has occurred that now.
Well, we could have predicted. We've talked about that, right? We said like the day after the election. I mean, the already New York, my own state of Massachusetts, I think even Michigan is starting to loosen restrictions now. They're saying, well, we have to get back to work. We have to save our economy all of a sudden.
All of a sudden, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's,
it's so disingenuous. I mean,
not only that, but the actual distribution of the vaccine is suddenly improving after having been delayed, after having suppressed the fact that they even had one until after the election. And now we find out that Amazon was contacted by President Trump, who asked them to come in and help distribution, and they refused. Now they're doing it.
Well, the politics on this have been absolutely insane. Although I'll tell you, I'm not sure that the supply has really come back, because Inova, which is a big hospital chain in Northern Virginia, had a deal for Fairfax County Public Schools, which is the biggest employer in the state, in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Right.
That if you were an employee, Inova had this program at whatever your closest hospital was, and based on a certain system, you were going to get in. Well, lo and behold, they retracted all that. So whatever's going on with it, I don't know. They claim they don't have the supply, but the politics have gotten crazy, all right? Tony Fauci apparently has not done enough damage. He's got a higher position now. And I'm telling you, when are people going to realize how stupid this guy is? He started out with, you don't need a mask. Then you do need a mask. Now you need 2 masks.
Yes. What's that all about? I mean, I get the sense that that's just an FU to Trump. I mean, now that he's been unleashed, now that it's, Biden is in office, it's sort of like, oh yeah, well, guess what? It's like, and what's going on? I don't see anybody doing it. I was at the grocery store the other morning here in a suburb of Boston, which is very liberal, and which are the first people who would strap on masks, so 2, 3, 4
And they have
masks.
a mass Gestapo going down the
Yeah,
street.
and also, quite frankly, people that are co-religionists to me. Let's not mention the name of my religion now,
All
because
right.
I can be pulled off. But let's just say that the combination of that and the liberalism, these are the first people to put on, they'll go out with a hazmat suit if they're told. And they're not doing it. I didn't see, I was in the grocery store early in the morning where, because that's when old people can go. And
When
I
did
only
you become
saw,
old?
well, that's my family actually.
Oh, all right.
But I mean, I didn't see, I saw maybe one person with the double mask, nobody else. So what is going on with that? Do you have any information about
Yeah,
that?
okay. Well, what's going on with that is that this is a classic case of leftism, and the answer to everything is doubling down. Okay, if the wealth redistribution program doesn't work, then we're going to have to do it again harder. So Tony Fauci, of course, is a leftist. He was a big Clinton guy, and
Yeah.
all right. So
It's also one of the top paid government officials in the
he
country.
is the highest paid federal employee.
Makes a lot more than the president.
Yes. All right. And by the way, as a sidebar to that, people say, well, why does okay? The reasoning behind it, which is totally fallacious, is that, well, this is a very important medical position in the government, and therefore we have to have a guy who we'd have to match what he'd make in the private sector. All right. Let's back off for a minute. All right. If you're going to make a lot of money in medicine, which doesn't really occur that much anymore, it's going to be in non-insurance related specialties, plastic surgery and whatnot. But if you're at the whim of an insurance company, you're not going to starve. But there aren't that many doctors making 400,000 that are working as average doctors. Some are making a little more than that, but then it starts getting a little sketchy. What are they doing? All right, so that argument is off. And by the way, anybody who's going to be a doctor in the government is an academic type doctor like Fauci. And you could get those guys for under 200,000 easily. So that argument is a joke. But now he's been raised up. So when he came up with this 2-mask thing on the Shepard Smith show, there's another winner. Talking about, yes, double mask. And Shepard said, well, maybe 3 is better, and quoted some bizarre study that if you put on 2 masks, it removes 75% of the viruses somehow. But if you have 3, it removes 90%. So I'm sure if you put a plastic bag over your head and you die of suffocation, it will have removed all of it. So he is simply just jumping on the trend. This guy is so clueless. And go back and check what his record was on AIDS. Terrible. I
think that wasn't he like one of the major promoters of this AZT treatment, which actually killed AIDS patients. Then
and what he would try to do was get it approved quicker, so it could have killed more people. That was covered up, by the way. Although there were people in the AIDS community saying no, this isn't it, because they were seeing their peers dropping from this.
That's why Magic Johnson he was able to survive, because he didn't take that drug.
Right. That's exactly right. And so this is his big resume, that he did that and did it all wrong. But people don't remember, because people with only a casual knowledge of this is, oh yeah, AZT was, no, it wasn't. It was bad, as it turns out.
Right. It was more toxic than the actual disease.
And Peter Duesberg was one of the early guys saying, no, the reason these people are dying is you're giving them freaking AZT. That's what's killing them. And of course, he was lambasted, but he was
the kook, right? He was called like a conspiracy nut.
Yeah. So they just doubled down. All right. Okay. The same thing with the lockdowns. Well, obviously the lockdowns were working, so now we're going to have to shut down everything. But then they somehow now realize that that's sort of politically untenable somehow.
Well, it's just people are not doing it anymore. But I guess that the question I have for you, Mike, is
Yeah.
as a medical researcher and writer,
Right.
is what's going on with the vaccine, and are we going to get the hell out of this thing?
Well, different opinions on the vaccine. I mean, the thing that's disturbing to me is that there have been a certain amount of unexplained deaths. It's very easy to say these guys were old and they're going to die anyway. But first of all, there's people that aren't old that have had this kind of reaction.
Well, do they know why they had that reaction? I mean, I assume
that's the problem. I mean, to show you where it's gone, you may have, well, you're in tune with this, but maybe your viewers haven't seen that there was a case last week in Placer County, California, which is the Sacramento area, where some guy dies. That's the total story, right? We don't know how old he is. We don't know if he was sick.
And it happened immediately after.
It was a couple of hours after he had the vaccine.
Okay.
All right. So, everybody, all the vaccine fanboys are saying, post hoc, ergo propter hoc fallacy. Well, okay. But at some point, you're going to have to wonder about this.
Well, look, I mean, I would expect there to be a complete investigation. This is like, what the FCC, the federal, the FAA, I mean, the Federal Aviation Administration, when there's a plane crash, a major plane crash particularly, they go in and they do a complete and total investigation in terms of what went wrong. Was it human error? Was it design error? Was it stress on the whatever it was, so that they can learn and make changes going forward. They can adjust some things maybe that need to be done differently. And I would expect the same thing to happen here. If somebody dies 2 hours after they should do a complete and total investigation of this person and why they died.
You're absolutely right. The problem is, though, that so far, and they haven't done anything on this Placer County guy, but the previous ones in Norway and in upstate New York, it was just the same mantra. Well, they're old and sick, they would have died anyway. Which, as I put in my article,
they didn't really look into it, though. I mean, maybe that is true, but they need to do an autopsy. They need to determine literally the cause of death.
I think.
Otherwise,
you're going to be able to judge the sincerity of all this, I think, based on what they do with this case. But if it comes out with the same thing, well, he was sick and old and tough luck. Except I don't know if I told you last.
That's
week,
scary.
Friend of mine is a retired DC cop, and his doctor was actually had COVID a few months prior and was forced to get the vaccine. He didn't really want it.
Okay.
So he ends up having a terrible reaction. He's in the hospital for 2 weeks. He's now recovered. So apparently what happened was his doctor visits him in the hospital. Why the hell did you get the vaccine? Well, they forced me. He said, no one should ever take it. All right. So there are mixed reviews on this thing.
By the way, why would somebody take the vaccine if they already have the virus?
Well, this is what's interesting.
Yeah.
It's very hard to make an argument that vaccine-based immunity is better than natural immunity. There are some very few cases where that may be true based on adjuvants they put in the vaccine and so on. But as I understand it, this vaccine is nothing more than a way of delivering the antigen to you in precisely once the mRNA converts, in precisely the same format that you would get with an active infection. So right there, for them to say, yeah, you should take it, is questionable. And I know of 2 cases personally where people that recovered from COVID got the vaccine and had a worse than normal reaction. right?
Well, first of all, I mean, is there any data that would talk about immunity after the virus, or is that still controversial?
Well, here's the interesting thing. There's problems with that because how do you measure it? All right, coronaviruses will mutate readily, and for some reason, which no one's explained, they decided to, well, there's the South African version, and there's this other version. No, there's probably hundreds of versions,
Right.
but maybe they focused on some of these. I don't know why. So no one can answer that question. I suppose if it's a great vaccine, it's going to keep you immune from all these varieties. But the problem is that we have a very good set of data on coronaviruses. It's called the common cold. And what tends to happen with the common cold is that sometimes you get it and sometimes you don't, based on the state of your immune system at the time, because number one, there's hundreds of variants of common cold coronaviruses, and there's your immunity doesn't last that long to any one of them. I don't know why, but apparently,
isn't it also true that given that a lot of this depends on your immune system and your ability and your overall health in terms
yes,
of keeping it in abeyance? But having said that, don't we all carry various viruses and things
well, heavens
in a
yes,
lifetime?
yeah, heavens yes. The herpes virus 6, HHV6, and HHV4, which your viewers may know as Epstein-Barr, are present in virtually 100% of people. And if you go on the HHV6 website and get similar information for Epstein-Barr, you'll find that they cause a lot of diseases, a lot,
Sure.
that are more serious than COVID-19. But nobody cares. There's never been a vaccine for one of these herpes viruses, and we just live with them. And what's going to happen with COVID is we're end up living with this virus. Because the other thing I didn't mention is there's now talk of additional boosters for all these variants. And the trouble is you can't do that. What are you going to do? Give people, you have to get a booster now every week for the variant of the week club.
They're saying that the vaccine will be equally responsive to all of these variants, no?
It might be. I mean, God forbid there may be some variant that's really a terrible killer. I don't know.
Right.
But certainly the variants aren't that different per se. So we just have to see. But the reason there's never been a successful vaccine for a coronavirus is exactly what you're seeing now. One, the immunity doesn't last very long. Two, they mutate like hell. And we end up, in the case of the common cold, I mean, not comparing the two, but in the case of the common cold, you live with it and you build your immunity with supplementation.
So in a way, the best thing is to build your immunity, and more conventional yeah. I mean, the conventional remedies are more vitamin D and vitamin C and zinc. And
I think it's a travesty that they never really made a point of that. I mean,
oh, it's terrible.
The biggest error, when you talk about
not to mention the H drug that we won't mention by name.
Well, there's the H drug and the I drug. And my son, who's a doctor, actually got COVID because he was on airplanes all the time. So he ended up curing himself with some ivermectin and a prednisone derivative, and he was fine in a few days. So,
and also, I mean, what was the plasma compound that President Trump was administered?
Well, that was genius, because the idea was that's essentially a do-it-yourself vaccine, right? That's getting the plasma from an already self-cured individual. So we're putting all kinds of good stuff in there. It's sort of a custom-made gamma globulin containing everything that at least that guy's body needed to defeat this virus. But the fact that they never talked about that, they never talked about therapies in general or building up your immune system. I've never heard of a situation where there's a killer, supposedly disease, and all you're doing is talking about a vaccine. What about the therapy? There wasn't a single word on therapy other than don't use H and don't use I. Okay.
Right, and nothing said about supplements or
Right.
anything or improving your immune system. I
So
mean,
this was an epic failure on the part of Tony Fauci. And what's his excuse going to be? Well, I don't get involved in it. Well, okay, but if you're trying to help people avoid infectious disease, your natural immunity has got to come first. You know, it's the old story that the cause of a headache is not that you don't have enough aspirin in your blood. Okay, and I think that too many of these people have this reverse approach to disease, which makes absolutely no sense. So that and so what? So you put the same people in charge, and in fact, they elevated his position somehow. I don't know what it's really called, but
well, I mean, he's like the official spokesman. You don't no alternative views, or even barely allowed.
that's right.
In fact, if we mentioned alternative views, we probably wouldn't be on YouTube right now.
That's right.
So, anyways, I just want to mention a quick program note. Yesterday, I was interviewed by a huge YouTube channel called The Meaning of Catholic by Timothy Flanders, the host,
Oh,
on the topic of my book, and it was just excellent. He's really a great guy, really nice guy, and I really appreciate it. It's available now on his channel, The Meaning of Catholic. He has some significant scholars there, so I mean, I'm like a nobody compared to his usual guest. But I really appreciated the opportunity. I mean, he asked me some questions that are a little uncomfortable, quite honestly, about Judaism and Catholicism. But I tried to do my best with it, and it was a good, solid, honest, maybe at a little times somewhat frank, but nevertheless, I think intellectually vigorous conversation. I mean, when I listened back to it afterwards, I kind of cringed at a couple of mistakes I made. And they were like minor mistakes. It makes
it's
me
pretty
wonder
hard to be perfect on the fly, though. You know.
Yeah, but I mean, it kind of actually makes me wonder if I might not be getting a little bit of a memory problem. I don't know. Some of these things that I mentioned were stuff that I should know, that I forgot. It was no big deal. I mean, I forgot the name. I referred to the Hasmonean kings of Israel as emperors. It's stupid and wrong. I mean, yeah. So I feel a little embarrassed when I think about that.
Yeah, but it shows that you're really doing it on your own.
True.
I mean, don't be like a Mike Medved where he had all the 3x5 cards that he could read off to make it seem like he was so smart, Yes.
Right. And I'm not pretending to be anything other than what I am. I'm not a rabbi. I'm not a scholar of Judaism. I'm just a layman out here, shooting from the breeze, the best I can based on, limited knowledge. I don't claim to be anything but I think it was really an interesting program, and I'm proud of it, and I would recommend it to our listeners. It's The Meaning of Catholic. It's available on YouTube. He's got a huge station, and it's Timothy Flanders was the host.
Is there a way to link to it on your
I should.
on your YouTube?
Yeah, I mean, I linked to it on my social network. I have to figure out how to put it up on YouTube. I'm not even sure how because he's on YouTube.
Yeah.
But I'll find a way. But just go to YouTube and you can find it.
All right, good.
It's available.
No, but that's good that you're non-co-religionists, as you might say, have noticed the book. But from a Catholic point of view, I would imagine that the most fair and honorable way to look at this thing is that you consider the obvious Jewish background of Jesus and his original followers and how this thing develops.
That's right. That's right. And I'm not, as I mentioned to him, I am not going to take any position. I'm not going to get into the question of Christology, of the divinity of Jesus, because it's not really my business. That's a Christian question. I urge Christians to embrace that as Christians, but
Well, there were debates with that within the early church, of course, too.
Well, yes, and obviously there was a split in the opinion on it, but I'm not going to come out and say I don't believe in it. I mean, it's not, I just don't think it would be like asking me if I believe in Muhammad. I mean, it's not, we're talking about a different faith structure, a different religion,
Yeah.
and I don't want to be put in that kind of a position.
But I guess the fact that your book was recognized in an, I'm not going to say a hostile forum, but at least a different forum,
Right.
is good.
Oh yeah, and it was an amazing. And he was a very respectful interviewer, and he didn't try to pull any fast ones on me. I mean,
yeah.
we debated some rather tricky and thorny issues, but also we got into, some solid issues about faith, and it was just I really had a great time. So
Good.
I recommend it. So
yeah,
anyway,
I haven't been on his channel for some time. I better check it out.
Yeah, he's good. He's very responsible, and he has a cross section of thinkers, mostly dealing with Catholic issues and theology. And he actually opens his program with the Latin Mass in Latin, and with the prayers. And he's cool. I mean, I really like him. He actually organized in his community, I guess what's called a walking rosary during the COVID because of social distancing, where people walk, in the neighborhood and they do rosary and they try to take care of people and see if everyone's okay. And, they're good people. I mean, he's a good guy. So.
Yeah, I spend time on some of the more edgy Catholic sites, like LifeSite News.
Oh, yeah.
Church Militant. But LifeSite News is tracking. In fact, that was the first place I caught this Placer County vaccine business.
Mm-hmm.
So and of course, he's had his major troubles with YouTube, as you can imagine.
Why? What's going on with that?
John Henry Weston. Well, he takes positions that YouTube may not like.
And okay.
He hasn't been permanently banned, but he gets thrown off from time to time.
Well, in a nutshell, without getting specific, what are they?
He would talk about the election. So
can't talk about that anymore.
Yeah, and he
that's bad.
Had a somewhat contrarian view to the whole COVID-19 thing.
We can't talk about that either.
Yeah, so he was treading on
thin ice.
Dangerous ground.
Yeah, that's look, this is the world we're in right now, unfortunately, and look, I should mention as a program note that in case this program is taken off the air on YouTube, and I can't predict whether it will not be. I mean, I wonder every morning when I turn it on, I wonder if it's still going to be there. I'm grateful that it is. But the program is also on about 7 or 8 other live streams, including DLive, Periscope, Twitch, Facebook, these other ones, Piccolo. There's a bunch of them that I'm now live on DK. And I also downloaded, and I'm live and downloaded onto a Podomatic, which I pay for. That's the one thing I actually do. So it's not so easy to take me off of that. And from Podomatic, it automatically goes into iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify, and several other servers. So I'm trying to, and plus I'm on Spreaker. So, and I'm finding out more and more of them every day. I'm trying to expand the number of.
Just when you think you know all the alternate platforms, you find 2 or 3 more.
Yeah, and I'm signing up. I'm on Rumble. I'm on Minds. The only one I'm not on that's kind of out there is Gab. I should be, but I probably will be soon. But the point I'm making here is that I am determined to do this program every day, at least once a day, but every day at 12 noon, live with phone calls. And if I'm taking off one, I assume I'll be on another. And as long as I'm on any, I'm going to continue to do it.
I think you'll keep fighting, even if you have to, take it all to Faneuil Hall.
Yeah,
Do it the old-fashioned way,
I mean, but right now it's like whack-a-mole. They're gonna knock me down one spot and they're gonna pop up on another. So that's the world we're in right now. You seem to think it's going to lessen. I hope it does. Parlor, of course, has been completely taken down.
Well, I'll tell you why it's going to lessen, because it's too much overhead to do what they're trying to do. First of all,
Well, they do it electronically. I don't think there's some guy. In fact, I explained this to a fellow TikToker who was really upset that he had a video taken down, and he's liberal. I mean, he's a man of the left, and he's absolutely having a meltdown. And I explained to him through a TikTok that they didn't take him down personally. It's that he said something, he used some word that hit the algorithm.
Yeah.
And the algorithm took him down. They don't have a staff of people that are sitting there listening. It's not like a radio station.
No.
Where, I mean, that's why I was suspended for 7 days on TikTok, and I understand it. I don't blame them, because I had a caller call in and mumble the N-word and then hang up. Now, that person was obviously trying to sabotage me, but at a conventional radio station, everyone knows I'm not using that word, and everyone knows that I hung up as soon as possible, and they know that this is a crank. And so you've got a manager there, you've got a sales department, you've got screeners, everybody moves on, and you get on with the show. But when you're dealing in this world of algorithm, where you have millions of people all over the world that are on, the line, they can't possibly monitor it in person. So they use electronic means. And if that shows up on their algorithm, then it automatically is taken down. I don't even think it's a person taking it down.
No, there isn't a person, but my point was that you have to maintain this algorithm. And you have to devote a certain amount of computing power to going through these millions of videos. And then you have to keep screwing around with that algorithm to get whatever the common diktat is for that time period, day or week or whatever. So there are people that are tweaking this thing. It's not just
that's right. No, this is where the problem comes in, because the algorithm has to be programmed. And you would hope that they're programming it to keep out bad stuff, violent people advocating violence or racism.
Well, they're trying to keep out a whole lot more besides that.
Well, that's the problem. They're political and they're radical and they're keeping out conservative opinion. And, so that's why you have a guy like Dennis Prager being banned. I mean, he's about as vanilla as you can get. The guy, it's totally like milquetoast conservatism, nothing there that's, but he's getting banned. And, you had Tom Fitton, the head of Judicial Watch.
They got thrown off YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, this is like because of their conservative opinions. So that's where there's a problem. And I suspect that maybe the reason that I haven't really been banned yet is because my show isn't big enough to pay attention to, which of course worries me, because obviously I'd like to build the show. So what do I have to look forward to? I'll build the show and then they'll take it away.
I think you have to get to a certain point before you're on the radar, because Sticks and Hammer, who's your buddy from Vermont,
right?
He had to get up really over 500,000 subscribers before he was even on the radar.
And then he was banned.
Well, individually banned. Not
so much whole channel, but I think even PewDiePie was banned from YouTube. And he didn't even do he did more of a prank type show, a comedy show.
Well, here's a guy with 110 million subscribers.
And he made a mild comment.
Yeah.
I think maybe it was supporting Trump. I don't know what it was, but he ended up losing everything. I mean, I think.
Well, no, he's still on. But he went through a lot of crap. But that's the thing. Then they realize, this guy's the biggest creator on the platform.
Well, they make it, and meanwhile, Twitter is allowing this guy to putting up, pedophilic pictures of this.
Yeah.
And then he sues them, and he's like, "Hello, take this down. This is hurting me. It's hurting my family." And they're like, "Oh no, that's within our standards."
Well, of course, they've never published their standards.
I hope he sues them, and I hope it's like
Yeah.
the Covington high school kid. Just takes them to the cleaners, and totally bankrupts them for that. Because I mean, maybe they'll finally decide to publish their standards. We'll find out what words we can and can't use instead of this kind of vague.
Well, it's very, yeah, well, that's our standard. Well, what are your standards? Well, we don't have to tell you.
That's right. And look, I think that in the conventional sense, I do try to maintain community standards. I've worked at radio stations. I understand how that works. You have to work within the context that's appropriate for a community.
Let me ask you about this, because you were in talk radio, conventional talk radio, for some time.
Right.
What is the situation with it now for a local personality?
I think it's still there. I think that I think that, starting with Rush Limbaugh and, big syndicated national figures, there was a major loss to local radio.
Yeah.
Because a radio station could simply turn Rush on for very little money.
Yeah.
As opposed to having a person in-house and the staff but in spite of that, I think it's still there. I don't think they'll ever go away. There's something incredibly amazing and dynamic about the live person, broadcasting on the live old-fashioned radio tower and having people calling in off the street.
Right, but within Boston, which is your market, they're certainly running the big national guys.
Right.
So how many personalities are there that have some following who are really strictly local or New England type?
There's very few now. I mean, WRKO had a huge creative heyday, I would say in the maybe 80s and into the 90s.
Yeah.
With Jerry Williams and David Brudnoy and Gene Burns. And these were great shows. And that's kind of over. The only one that's really left now is Howie Carr. And I admire Howie Carr, but it's kind of like a bit resting on laurels. It's not like the most cutting edge thing. And I think he's trying to spin off his chief producer, that being Grace Curley, who now has a show in the afternoon. And Jeff Cooner in the morning is tremendous. He's doing a great job. I tried to catch a little of his show.
Okay.
He's very courageous. So, it's still there. It's not what it was. You still have some very local people in smaller markets who are trying to make a go of it. I mean, I can probably name them in like one hand, but it's still out there. I still keep an eye on it.
Okay, so what you're saying is, if again, I don't know what constitutes a smaller market, but if you went to something like Manchester or
Manchester, Nashua.
Yeah.
I did that for a number of years in that I broadcasted at smaller markets, and the business model for that is that you have to go out and sell ads.
Yeah.
Get sponsors, and then you get paid out of the percentage from the ads. And it's a very, it's a tough thing to do. I did it, and I don't really want to talk too much about that, but I mean,
but that's what most of these guys are doing now.
Yeah, I mean, even Howie Carr, I think technically his show is a paid program, and he's got big sponsors who come in and provide enough revenue so that he can pay for the time and make a good profit. I think that's the deal he has.
Okay.
But I don't know. And I think Jeff Cooner, on the other hand, is in-house. I think he's an employee. He gets paid, a salary, and a good one, and deserves it. But I think that for smaller players, it's very difficult.
So that's really changed.
What's going on. And I've now come up with a way to almost replicate a radio experience right here, right now, because I give out a phone number and I'm getting calls and they're live. I mean, the problem is I can't screen them. And that is problematic if you have a crank, somebody wants to sabotage me. So I just try to keep my finger on the button. And if I sense that someone's not kosher, plus I've had a few people banned from the Skype. that I can click them off as fast as I can. That's the best I can do. But I really can't screen it. This is just a one-man deal here.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to building a live audience. I haven't given out the number too much today. That's why we're not getting calls. But you've seen it, Mike. You were on my show recently, but we had a lot of calls.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Well, it gives another dimension to it.
Well, that's sort of ultimately what I've wanted to do. I've wanted to have a live radio program with phone calls, people calling in, and just me and the callers. That's the ultimate for me. That's what I started listening to Jerry Williams, who I consider to be my mentor. And he was just brilliant. He would turn on the phone lines and he would sit there for 4 hours without any guests. And he would just take call after call. And it was just incredible. It was just absolutely.
That was the original format, and that's still the best. And Limbaugh was asked, why don't you have guests? And he really didn't, at least at first. It was strictly calls, and it works. The trick, I guess, is some of the calls aren't going to be that good. Not that they're sabotage or negative, but
just get rid
people
of them.
Just aren't that.
You're not interesting.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how interesting people are. I mean, you get people to reveal, you as a talk show host, you kind of help people open up a little bit on the air. And I mean, there are some people, the late Larry King was very good at that. I used to listen to him late night. And, he would throw a softball. He didn't come in with both fists like I have tended to do. I mean, he would go in and make somebody who disarm a person by just, finding a little bit about them and easing them into a few talks. And then before you know it, they're revealing stuff. And he had some pretty bad people on his show, I think he had, like the radical Islamists and just people who did not mean well. And he would, by giving a soft interview, he would get a lot more out of them than if he went in pugilistically and, like a war. And, to me, that was brilliant. I mean, it was great radio. I mean, Jerry Williams took the ham-fisted approach. And that also was fantastic. I mean, oh my God. I mean, he'd duke it out with people on the air in no uncertain terms.
But he would let them first raise their point.
Another good guy right now that's out there, and he's a man of the left, is Joe Madison. He comes out of Ohio. He's black. He's very ultra liberal.
Yeah.
And he can be as nasty. He uses the F word a lot. This is on Sirius XM, so right. It's not on terrestrial radio, as they call it. And it's very gripping. You feel his rage and his anger, which is good radio. Because it's an emotion, and you can, and he utilizes it properly. I mean, he's not a hater. He does it because there are things that are angering, and he lets you know this, and you in no uncertain terms. I mean, that's part of what radio should do. Talk radio. It has a cathartic effect. It's like people are angry and enraged over something that's going on. You call up and you get to have it out. I mean, that's a good thing. That's honest.
Well, that was one of the, if you ever listen to Art Bell, that people would call in with these bizarre theories.
Well, he did like the overnight kind of like the extraterrestrial stuff, didn't he?
Yeah.
I listened to him a few times. I mean, that's not my cup of tea, but yes, that's another.
But it wasn't just that. I mean, it was any type of conspiracy theory you could think of, and some you probably couldn't think of. And people would he let him go on and on if it was interesting, and then he would start questioning some of the premises.
Sure,
sometimes, but
it's great stuff. Him and I think it was Jeff Renzi used to do that.
Yeah,
a couple of those guys. I don't know if anyone's doing that now. But
no, because a lot of it is streamed. And if you get too far out there, you'll get cut off. So
you can't talk conspiracy anymore. That's a bad word.
No.
I mean, look, you don't get into certain conspiracies. Like I would not talk about any conspiracies involving an ethnic group, particularly by co-religionists. Let's just put it that way. We don't do that. I never do that. Although I'd like to bring some of those people in to question them, find out why they believe what they do, but you can't. I've done it a few times. I've had those shows removed from YouTube.
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, you can't do it. You cannot mention that stuff. But even if you're doing it like I'm trying to do it responsibly, and in fact, I do on Thursday, I have David on, and David happens to be a co-religionist, and we discuss issues of religion, of our own religion in politics, and we talk about Israel, and we talk about, and one of those shows was taken down. What are we, anti-Semitic? I mean, this, it was crazy. But it's, again, I think it's an algorithm. It picked up certain words that either he or I used, and it went with that. I think in that case, they actually put the show back after I contested. But nevertheless, that's what we're dealing with now. Conspiracy theories are fascinating, but you cannot, you have to differentiate between that and those which are harmful to groups of people. You can't do that. But you can look at political conspiracies. I wrote a whole book, my book, Assassination in America. It's all about conspiracies. Anyhow, but so what else is new?
Well, what I'm writing about it is going to be, and I suppose this could be controversial, but there are some well-respected statisticians and so on who are taking a hard look at these COVID death numbers. And let's just say that they believe the real numbers are lower. And it's pretty heavy going reading through these papers. So the challenge of this article is going to be to kind of get that into bite-sized chunks. But this is not some crank. I mean, these are people who've been around for quite a while.
We've talked about this. I mean, there's the whole business of cranking up the testing.
Yeah.
So that you have like a tiny, tiny drop of COVID in your system, and that you declared COVID.
Well, Corey Mullis, when he was still alive, who invented PCR, came out real hard saying it wasn't intended for this.
Right.
And he suddenly went from being this Nobel Prize winner genius to persona non grata.
Right.
But
I wonder why. We can't really go there, but it's an interesting subject. Anyways, Mike, let's let everybody know where they can read your articles.
Okay, they're all on healthnewsdigest.com. There's links to some of the stuff on Shaw's Ecologic, but if you want the health stuff, it's on Health News Digest. And I mirror 800 or 900 of these things going back to many years ago. So,
you have a huge archive. It's an amazing one.
Yeah. There's I sometimes go back and look at it and I surprise myself.
Oh yeah. I mean, and it's interesting sometimes to go back and look at how you thought about things back then, and it's a great thing. All right, so Mike, listen, pleasure as always.
Yeah, and we'll be 2 weeks into the Biden administration by then when we reconvene.
And I hope the country is still everything moving along.